there will be no rights for those who are seen as agitators and subversive and anti the regime.
Within hours of Gaddafi's appearance on television, a raucous demonstration took place outside the British embassy. The British ambassador attempted to pacify the crowds.
In approved Foreign Office technique, we had conveyed a message through the police that if they wanted to deliver a letter to us, we were prepared to receive it. This is one of the ways of making sure that a demonstration, trying to make sure that a demonstration remains reasonable. So yes, sure enough, they did want to deliver a letter. A letter was produced and it was delivered through the door, and it was a circular letter from the Libyan Foreign Ministry inviting all embassies in Tripoli on a picnic the following week. This was passed over the heads of the crowd and pushed through a door open to such width, you know, and that's what we received.
Outraged by Libya's bullying behaviour and with both embassies still under siege, Britain broke off diplomatic ties with Libya.
The break-off of diplomatic relations comes less than 24 hours after Colonel Gaddafi warned that although talks were going well at that stage, the Libyans were very, very angry and he could not promise further protection outside the British embassy here.
The move ratcheted up the tension between the two countries. The ambassador's home in Tripoli now received some unwelcome news.
There was a nasty moment when the Spanish ambassador rang up my wife and said, "They'll burn you down, you know, they always do." But he was wrong.
You know, we thought everything was going to work out fine, and it's really rather a disappointment.
The Libyans were also angered by the ambassador's wife's enthusiasm to talk to the media.
I don't think so.
Eventually, they got fed up with my wife telephoning the press, and they cut off the telephone to the house. But luckily, a very nice Nigerian butler, so-called, remembered that there was a separate telephone in the changing room at the swimming pool, which was locked. But they managed to break the lock off, and so they were able to use that telephone subsequently, and the Libyans weren't wise to it.
In London, with the embassy still surrounded, frustration was mounting.
In my view, they could have gone in perhaps much earlier, using the SAS, got the people out, and handed them over to the police for a normal murder investigation.
Despite the intense public pressure to take decisive action, Britain blinked first in the confrontation. The climb down began when the Libyans inside the embassy were allowed to send home 18 bags.
They were not searched before the van left under police escort from St James's Square, bound for Heathrow Airport.
Even though it was possible that the murder weapon was hidden inside one of these bags, international law meant the police had no right to search them. It was the first indication that international diplomacy would thwart the investigation. In a tit-for-tat agreement, the British ambassador's family left Tripoli.
The day began as the embassy staff and families gathered outside the ambassador's home. 30 people left today, women and children first. The remaining 14 will go at the weekend, including the ambassador.
Despite 10 days under siege, the ambassador's wife remained defiant to the end.
Happy and glorious, come to reign over us. God save the Queen. Hip hip hooray!
Back in St James's Square, the SAS was stood down, much to their disappointment.
Yeah, I thought, fuck it. We should have gone in there and killed them. Should have just mopped it up. Maybe left one, I don't know, for interrogation.
Then, 11 days after the murder of Yvonne Fletcher, in a moment which horrified Britain, the Libyans walked out of the embassy.
I couldn't believe that. I really couldn't believe it. I mean, I felt so let down. I was let down by the Metropolitan Police at that stage because they should have stormed that building. We all thought that. All the people at the police station, all those on the front line, all said that. We all agreed.
I felt that this is one of those occasions when you have to suppress personal feelings of outrage, because that's a natural human feeling which anybody was likely to have, against the consideration of what really is in the national interest to do.
As the Libyans headed home, no police officer was allowed to ask them what had happened on the day of the shooting. Just like the bags that could be holding the murder weapon, the diplomats were protected by international law.
As the chanting, wailing and shouting continued, the crowd swarmed through the airport. Every one of them maintaining the St. James's Square shootings had nothing to do with them.
Returning home, the Libyans were given a hero's welcome. Some reporters were able to get closer to them than any policeman or Secret Service agent.
Did you hear gunshots?
No, there were no gunshots at all.
So what was the first you knew that someone had been shot?
Yeah, on telly.
On television? You did not know before you saw it on television?
No.
Who do you think fired the shot?
I think outside here. I think some people there.
Were there
something outside only.
Were there any guns or explosives inside the bureau?
No, we haven't.
In contrast to the triumphant scenes in Libya, Salisbury Cathedral fell silent for Yvonne Fletcher's funeral.
I was privileged enough to carry Yvonne's coffin at Salisbury Cathedral. I have never seen so many people at a service in my life. The cathedral was packed, not by just police officers, not by just dignitaries, but by ordinary members of the public, which proves how popular she was.
For Yvonne Fletcher's family and friends, the service would mark the start of a long and painful battle for justice. And the investigation into her murder would remain shrouded in mystery for decades, until a secret report came to light.
The author of the report has obviously had access to a lot of information. Witness statements, photographs. There's not a lot of doubt in what his view is. The report does seem to reach some fairly strong conclusions.
Over the last 26 years, the Metropolitan Police have uncovered a vast amount of evidence relating to the murder of Yvonne Fletcher. In 2007, an international lawyer reviewed the material for the Crown ProsecutionService. He concluded there could be sufficient evidence to charge 2 Libyans with conspiracy to murder. We asked a former criminal barrister and now firearms expert to review the report.
The author of the report has obviously had access to a lot of information. Witness statements, photographs, the reports of forensic scientists. So a lot of this has been brought together to make a fairly comprehensive document.
The report raises significant questions about whether the authorities could have been better prepared. There were 4 warnings from the Libyan authorities about possible violence at the embassy. The first came in Tripoli just over 12 hours before Yvonne Fletcher was shot, when the British ambassador was called to a meeting with Libyan officials.
And they told me that there was a demonstration planned for the following morning outside the Libyan office in London, and that I was to get it stopped. And I said, you must be joking. You have demonstrations outside my embassy from time to time. They're properly policed. I have no complaints. The same thing will happen in London. They said, you don't understand. This is different. This is very important. We're giving you a really serious message. You must have it stopped.
After the meeting, the ambassador immediately wrote a memo to be sent to the Foreign Office.
After midnight on the 16th of April by Hafiana, yet another member of the new foreign liaison. Anti-Jamahiriya demonstration was expected outside the People's Bureau in London on the 17th of April. The Libyan government would not be held responsible for the consequences if the demonstration took place, and that might include violence.
But the Foreign Office had also been given their own warnings when 2 Libyan diplomats, Mustafa Touri and Hanida Zlitini, went to the Foreign Office in London to give a similar message to officials. Just to be sure that their message was received, they returned the following morning and repeated it. And according to the report, there is evidence that there were warnings of violence even on the morning of the shooting. An employee of the Metropolitan Police claims a Libyan, later revealed as Saleh Ibrahim Mabrouk, tried to stop him putting out barriers right here in front of the embassy. At one point in their altercation, Mabrouk allegedly told him, "We have guns here today. There is going to be fighting, and we're not going to have responsibility for you or for the barriers." Mabrouk was eventually arrested for his protests and was still in custody at the time of Yvonne Fletcher's murder. He denied any prior knowledge of the shooting, saying he thought the embassy was going to be attacked by a Palestinian group. But the inevitable question for those working alongside Yvonne Fletcher that day: why weren't we told?
If those warnings had been heeded and action taken, Yvonne would still be here today. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. I mean, the demonstration probably wouldn't have taken place. If it had been taken place, all different arrangements would have been put in hand, surely.
If you're suggesting that there was any indication given to us, or to me, certainly, that the Libyans were going to take violent action against the demonstrators, that's not the case. Don't forget that these people are pretty wild, and they were quite capable of threatening all sorts of things to all sorts of people at all sorts of time.
According to the report, the warnings could infer that the shooting was part of a carefully planned operation which had support from senior officials in the Libyan regime. When the embassy was searched after the siege, officers found an arsenal of weapons and ammunition. High levels of firearms discharge residue were also found around these two windows, suggesting that there were two gunmen.
We've got two shooting positions, if you like, two windows that were next to each other, and you've got bullets that were found in different areas. So all these things, in my view, would suggest that two guns were probably used.
Using this information, officers then plotted the direction of the shooting. The location where they found the bullets in the square indicated that the two gunmen had aimed in different directions.
There were two distinct areas in which the bullets were found. The first area was in front of the bureau, and the second area was across the square. So it seems that somebody was aiming more or less downwards into the demonstrators and obviously towards PC Fletcher. The three other bullets were recovered some distance away, which suggests that that gun wasn't being pointed downwards. It was being pointed perhaps upwards, but certainly in a different angle.
The confidential report prepared for the Crown Prosecution Service doesn't name any suspects as the gunman. But could more have been done at the time to identify the killer? Linda Kells was working in number 3 St James's Square on the day of the murder. She thought she saw someone at the window of the embassy around 5 minutes before the shooting.
The window was opened up by, he was sort of an Arab-looking man, but he wasn't a terribly swarthy Arab-looking. He had a light-coloured suit on, a moustache. Yeah, I would have recognised him at the time.
We showed Linda Kells photographs of some of the Libyans who were inside the embassy on the day of the shooting. Inevitably, 26 years after the event, she's unable to recall precisely who she saw.
I would say anyone of... Oh, so difficult, so long ago. Any one of these three.
Do you think if you'd been shown those photographs nearer the time, you might have been more confident about who you saw?
If I'd have seen them at the time, I'm sure I would have been more confident about which one I saw. But not now.
For legal reasons, we're not able to identify the men Linda Kells singled out. While the identity of the gunman remains a mystery, the report does name 2 Libyans who, it concludes, could be charged with conspiracy to murder. Both are identified as being key members of a revolutionary committee appointed by Colonel Gaddafi.
Gaddafi sent a group of students under a student visa